Well, but it's also of its time, you know, that's a movie of its period, you know. And
right, 96,
yeah, it's got nice and slow pacing. You know, I almost think in most contemporary movies, they would have taken out the whole Mike, the side story, you know, with that Mike guy.
Yanagata, or I'm saying his
right.
name wrong. Yanagata.
Yeah, Mike, like, I think most movies now, they wouldn't have had that. They would have taken that out because it seems like it's such a detour, you know, from this main story. I don't know. What do you think?
I was wondering about that myself in terms of the difference between her, the officer, her, and the officers as they exist in the episodic world. And here, she really doesn't have anyone. The system isn't really, you know, the police system isn't keeping her down or isn't getting in her way. I mean, she's conducting her investigation and piecing it together.
The most competent cop we see.
Right. And none of the cops are antagonistic with her at all. Right. They're all, you know, they're all getting information for her and relaying it back to her, vice versa.
Right. The system's working for her.
Yeah.
And she's on the top of her game. She's
right.
Notices things that other people don't notice.
Well, she's going up to the Twin Cities to meet him. Stops in at Jerry's office. He throws some shit out there, and she says, "All you know, there's a basic alrighty." Then I said, "Okay." Then she goes out on her way. Then she has the meeting with this guy, and the interesting thing about that is in the meeting with a friend from high school, basically kind of coming on to her a little bit, and then tells her the story about his wife, and he's crying. She has that phone conversation with, I believe it's another police officer from out there, right? And she starts telling about how sad she is about this Mike. And the girl says, "Oh no, she's still alive." Because, you know, I guess he was pestering her. And I thought the look she had when she was driving her car afterwards, and she says, "Ladies, I'm surprised."
Well, I wonder if that, Paul, is it a plot point to sort of indicate to us that she...
I took it as this was kind of the impetus for her when she was going back to see Jerry Lundegaard, to see through the bull. You know, she stayed on point with him until he basically fled the interview, and that was key. That was a key thing for her, because soon as she saw that he fled the scene, I mean, she knew she was on it.
Right.
Just kind of a little opening salvo. First and foremost, it's good to see you guys. As you can see, Jack and Jack.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
All right.
I'm doing good. Hey, how you doing, Jerry? Good seeing you again. I mean, Jack. Lundegaard. You know why? Because Jerry Lundegaard. I had him on my mind, man.
It's okay, Marge.
Okay.
I'll take it. She's a wonderful human being.
All right, I'm going to start out with the opening salvo here, guys. Fargo movie, 1996, Coen brothers. I can't do this without some type of comparison to the TV episodic, and most specifically, season 1. Of course, we get that original signature opening music, a slow tempo under the original "This Is a True Story" titles. And this thing, the movie, all in one page, in one shot, black background, white, right? And then that tempo builds, and it bursts through with Jerry Lundegaard's car towing. The car pops right through. It's almost like a tank, right? Coming through or something in a war or something. They get that feeling like, but it's just this car, and he's towing a car in Fargo, North Dakota. I see like weak people trying to bullshit their way up some illusory corporate ladder. Jerry is meeting Carl and Gar, the closest thing in this to Malvo, where he is late by an hour to arrange an automobile for them to use to kidnap his wife, right? The twist in this first meet, for me, is the two criminals are more suspect of Jerry than he is of them. this is to them, this is a business deal, guys. Ironically, Gar is the only one who really expresses a repulsion at the idea of him wanting his wife kidnapped. And Jerry is full of the shit all the way through this. And his insignificance resulted in dead people, including his wife, father-in-law, a state trooper, and Carl, and a wood chipper.
And two witnesses.
And two witnesses.
Right.
You're right. Two witnesses on the road. And I'll throw a bone out to Jerry. The deal he brought to his father-in-law's attention, vetted by Sam Grossman, turned out to be a good deal. But he has no money, and in true fashion, Jerry screwed out of the deal. And that scraping the windshield moment is actually, personally, is quite relatable. And the same way he gets screwed out of the ransom money. And of course, Carl, Steve Buscemi, in the end, rues the day he ever met Jerry, the train wreck of a car salesman. The big difference between Jerry Lundegaard and Lester Nygaard is the difference between an episodic and TV and film. The similarity is the way he rehearses the call to wait about his wife missing, like Lester rehearsing shooting Melville. Jerry has no Lawrence Melville. His wife is actually pretty nice to him. The father-in-law is the one who disrespects him and holds him down when he claims how important the deal is for his wife and child. His father-in-law assures him that the wife and child never have anything to worry about. Jerry's excluded from it. Carl has the line when shit gets real. Oh, daddy. He knows he's in deep when Gar shoots the trooper, and then everything else comes on. And Jack was right. We don't see Marge until I think right after that
30,
shooting.
32 minutes.
33 minutes into it. And then the scenario of good versus evil, Marge Gunderson, Frances McDormand, isn't up against the system, as we once talked about. That no one second guesses her like the officers in the episodic. We see her pieced together, and maybe the only thing she's up against, and this is what I'm thinking about as we talk about her when she goes to meet that guy, is her own good-naturedness. I think she wants to see good in people. In the scenario of good versus evil, she tells Gar in the back seat of her car, like a mother scolding a child, and all for what? Money.
A little bit of money.
A little bit of money. With that, I open it up to you guys. One of the questions, subject of interest, and Jack beat me to it. Mike Yanagata, Marge meets his wife has actually died, but when she meets him, there's that whole thing that he goes through about, he's so lonely, and tells her the story how she died of leukemia, and only to find out that, she never had anything to do with him. She was going after her, and apparently, and then he's not even working like he said he was. He's living in his parents' basement. So I'm going to stop right there and open it up and let you guys jump in. Jack asked the question. I figured you might want to.
Well, at first I was thinking it was the sort of sub-story that you subplot that might get cut in a contemporary movie.
Yeah.
But then, as we were talking, it does occur to me that maybe the whole point of it is to teach her that she can be fooled,
Yeah.
And so to keep following her instincts, even when she feels like maybe they're wrong or something. I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Greg?
It's funny. That's one of those scenes when I've seen the movie. I saw it twice in the theater when it was released. And 23 years later, I saw it twice again just a couple of days ago. I always felt like that scene itself could have been cut in any given time. So it was always the question of why is that in there? And I think it builds on what you said, Jack. Not only the fact that it's in there because it shows Marge good nature and that the possibility that she could be fooled, but the Coen brothers wrote it in such a very clever way that just as she's starting to leave town, that whole idea that she was fooled by this guy, and her friend had to, kind of tell her that, no, this guy's been going through mental issues, and he's never married. He was never married to her, and he lives in his parents' basement. That made her go back to talk to Jerry, the William H. Mason character, because remember, the first time she met with him, she just kind of bought his story just outright. And then it was just like, okay, well, thank you very much. And she was on her way. But that was kind of the follow through of saying, well, okay, well, let me talk to this guy again. So that's kind of what I took out of it, because by that it made sense. On the surface, it looks like it had nothing to do with the plot. But what it did do is it had a lot to do with character building. Yeah. And I think that the idea that Marge was fooled once, then maybe she was fooled again when she talked to Jerry.
Would it be a different movie if that scene with Mike were cut?
My gut feeling on it is definitely, yeah.
Or you just you take the two Jerry Lundegaard interviews and splice them together.
I mean, technically, you could cut that scene and you could splice those scenes together, and I don't think it would be missed, provided that you never had that scene. And so therefore, because she could have just did a follow through, but I do think that that scene helped really catered around Margie's backstory, and outside of having this really loving relationship with her husband, you don't really know much of her backstory outside of her being the sheriff. And in this particular case, it looked like she's the top sheriff in town. It's like everybody's answering up to her. So I do think that having that moment where she goes and meets with this guy kind of really fills in some of her backstory, how trustworthy she really is. And it pits that good nature up against these ruthless killers that she's going to end up having to chase after. So right. I think it did add something to it. And I think that's what makes this movie so uniquely interesting and strange and kind of fun at the same time.
I agree with you. I would just sit there and say, Ed, that I don't think you cut this. I mean, I know there's a reason why they didn't, right? But I think it's a lesser movie if they did, because it add, if it didn't add something to it, if it didn't,
right,
like you, I mean, you pointed it out perfectly. That was the impetus for her to go back, and we talked a little bit earlier that once she did that and she had that meeting with him where she got him, he fled the scene, and that was that's what zeroed her in on. She knew she was onto something.
Well, wait a minute. How funny was that scene where he fled? She sees him going out in the car, and she's just like, he fled the interview. He fled the interview. It's like she really didn't know what to do. And it was the most, I felt like.
It also feels like the kind of scene that movie executives would push them to cut out,
Yeah, probably right.
Like exactly what we've just been talking about, where they don't quite see it. And so, well, we don't need that guy. What do we need that guy for?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the scene, when she has that phone call with that gal, there's a no dialogue scene right after that, actually, where she's driving, and the look on her face, I swear to God, it reminded me exactly of the look on her face at the end when she's driving and she starts talking to that guy. It's just like she can't believe that people behave this way. It's like it's amazing, and just like you said, it's like she realizes she could be fooled, and
but even though she could be lied to, she can't be taken advantage of, because you remember that scene where her old boy is just like talking about he wants to sit right next to her. He literally gets up and tries to scoot next to her. She doesn't budge. She literally doesn't budge. She just like, if you could just sit back across from me, please, And right off the bat, and then she makes up. But this is what's interesting about Marge. She could have just left it at that. Just say, no, can you please go back to your seat? But instead she says, well, no, because, I want to be able to see you instead of having to turn my neck, And look, you get the sense they weren't necessarily friends. They were just associates, or she knew him in high school. Yeah. But he calls her in the middle of the night. Well, I think it was almost 11 o'clock in Minnesota. So that might as well have been 2 or 3 in the morning. but she takes the time to answer the phone call and actually get into conversation. And Fargo, from the movie onto the TV series, you usually have a protagonist that's just really a decent person. And I like that about the movie and the series.
Carl and Gare. Steve Buscemi, and I got to look up the actor's name again.
I think it's Peter Storm.
Yeah.
Storm.
Murray?
Yes.
Yeah. They say that two people, if they really want to see if their relationship, they have a good relationship, they go on the road together. You find out, if they can really, have a good relationship. So, Steve, Carl and Gary's relationship on the road. Let's talk about it.
If you're gonna be quiet the whole time, I'll do the same thing.
Which you couldn't. You couldn't do.
I cannot keep talking. I mean, there's a scene like that. Basically, that's a scene from The Odd Couple. It's Felix talking to Oscar, like literally the same exact dialogue. Where it's like, okay, if you don't want to talk, I won't talk. I can do that. I can do exactly what you're doing.
Well, I mean, I think it's great that when we're introduced to them as they're talking to Jerry, and you could tell it really annoyed the Carl, the Steve Buscemi character, about punctuality. It's like, we waited here. It's just constantly, you said, I thought it was, and Jerry's like, I thought it was 8:30. No, he told us 7:30. So there was a lot of repetition going on with there. And you got Gar literally someplace else. It just, it was like, he could care less. And then I love the fact that it's like, I'm not going to debate you, Jerry. I'm not going to debate you. The dialogue itself is so hilarious. So it's already setting you up for a very comic situation here. But I'll tell you, though, there's a scene when they're driving in the car, and Gar mentions the fact that he had pancakes. He wanted pancakes. And then Carl's like, we just had pancakes. And then when Gar looks over at Carl with those dead eyes, right there, you're like, he wants to kill him right then and there. I mean, literally, you were dealing with a character that at any moment can explode and incredible violence is going to happen.
Over pancakes.
Over pancakes. Something as simple as pancakes. He was like, wow, And even Carl was like, well, look, we can get laid. We can go someplace to get laid. Okay, we'll pick up the pancakes, then we go get laid.
Yeah, we certainly knew who the alpha dog was.
Absolutely.
You knew right away. Jerry definitely was an hour late, and he just lies his
Yes.
He just fucking lied.
I mean, when they kidnapped his wife, I mean, that shot of one of them coming up in a ski mask while the wife is just knitting, and she just looks, but she doesn't run. She's just like, what? As I think the Buscemi character, Carl, is in the mask, he looks through the window, and then he just starts breaking in.
Yeah, it's a tragic comedy. The big difference, right, between TV episodics and a movie, obviously, you got an hour and 38 minutes or whatever to tell the story, get it, and then wrap it up. Whereas at the end of episode 1, and the Crocodile's Dilemma, we're just beginning, and Lester Nygaard has the journey to go on. I mean, he's got Jerry, hotel room, that hotel room at the end.
But yeah. But let's talk about how similar those two characters are. They're usually characters that are weak. They're being picked on or bullied on by somebody, and usually somebody close to them. Like with the TV show, Nygaard was with his wife. With Jerry, it is with his father-in-law. And they always have some half-baked plan that they think could net them a fortune, and somehow by doing that, I mean, just think of the irony. I mean, the way, how do you think about kidnapping your wife to try to get a ransom to invest into another car dealership, which I feel like he's doing that just to show his father-in-law that, I can do it too. I'm a man.
Greg, though, it was a no rough stuff type deal. So, he explained that really clear.
Well, he gets screwed out of his own deal. He brings it to this. And the first thing they say is, "What's your finder's fee?" And you're just like shaking your head, like, "Oh God,
damn, this guy."
You can't catch a break.
And for a moment, also, I kind of felt bad for Carl, because Carl just it's like he shows up and his father's there, and he goes, "Who the fuck are you?" You just can't.
It shows that what happens when losers plan a kidnapping scheme. It's going to be it's going to fuck up. I mean, let's talk about the look of the film, which I think carried over a little bit in the TV series, and I think the TV series really took they borrowed heavily from the movie. But just watching the movie again, the cinematography from Roger Deakins is spectacular. He makes an empty road looks like a painting, and if you notice, every shot of the highway is usually one car driving, and then it's covered white of snow. It's like desolate. It's isolating, and even when something does happen, like when Gar chased down the witness, which was the funniest scene, where you got Carl grabbing the dead trooper, and then the witness are driving slowly, looking at them, and he basically runs him off the road. But the way that is framed, and the way the composition, where Deacon has the light of the car that flipped over, and then Gar getting out of the other car in silhouette, surrounded by white snow. It's a beautiful looking movie. Or my favorite shot is the shot after Jerry gets screwed out of the deal, and he's walking in the parking lot, and it's an overhead shot of just this car and this tiny little man walking with these little parking lot trees around it or something. It's just it's just a visually stunning film.
Jerry Lundegaard. Jack, I know there's a book out called Bullshit Jobs. There's so many bullshit jobs. I always thought sales was I come to the conclusion that sales is a bullshit job. And I want to know your impression of Jerry Lundegaard, the salesman, and that True Coat scene.
He was trying to sell that.
Yeah, he was trying to sell, well, because that's the only way he makes money. It's the only money. And of course, nobody wants it ever. Well, it supports everything that we've just said about him. And he's constantly trying to save face. He's always faced with these, minorly humiliating situations, and he's got to save face because he's so embarrassed by himself all the time. I mean, he's very much a loser, and often losers can be sympathetic, but he's never sympathetic.
No, he's not. Yeah. He's not. Matter of fact, even with the True Coat thing, he actually does get the guy to still buy the car with the True Coat, because he does this thing where he's like, which the guy that he's scamming is so funny, because with that accent, he's literally just saying, they do it to you every time. There's always more with these guys. And but the thing is, he comes back after talking to his boss, and he doesn't say anything to his boss, but he comes back and say, I can knock $100 off. But the guy still, he knows what he is. He's nothing but a charlatan, I'm a con man. But yeah, he's like, give me that checkbook so I can, write him a check, which means that he will dupe anybody just to get money, just to, again, prove that he's, he's a better salesman than he is.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, because when you step onto a car lot, it's like you're losing automatically. You're going to have to go through this experience that is so unpleasant.
Right.
It's just like, oh fuck. It's like fuck. The thought of ever going on a car sales lot again, my life, I want to do anything I could to avoid it because of that.
Yeah.
Because you'll be, I know I'll be the guy sitting there. Well, darn it! Give me that check. It's like you just lose. So actually, it's a perfect job for him because.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
If you know anything about being a car salesman, the margins are tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They make like maybe a couple $100 on a car.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not making anything.
Yeah.
And especially when they don't buy the paint stuff.
But Jack, I think you said something I think that's interesting, is the fact that a lot of times losers can be very sympathetic. Why do you think this character isn't?
I think he's set up that way. I think he's set up for us not to like him. He's not.
You're right. You're right.
He's a buffoon, and we know he's a buffoon, and the fact, and I think maybe we enjoy his humiliation because he's so pathetic.
Well, that's a good point, because it sets you up right at the beginning. I mean, where you got Carl and Gar saying, "I don't get it. Why are you doing this? So you're going to kidnap your wife just to get money that you could have just asked her to, or just go for, or ask your father-in-law." And then you see the relationship between the father-in-law and him, and then you understand that he really has no spine. He has no balls.
And from his point of view, he has nowhere else to go. He has nobody else. But it is funny that the criminals are the voices of reason.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. In episodics, you at least give him like a season of where the guy is going up against stuff, like in that season 1. He becomes successful. He becomes a successful.
He does.
He turns into Melville Reed does something to him in terms of, like, as we talked about, that he kind of changes who he was. That there's an inner animal that comes out of whatever. He turns into an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting case too, because I think he's also another unsympathetic character as well, because when he's picked on, I think there's a thing of, even if you're a loser, there's got to have some fight in you. You got to be able to understand, okay, if I'm getting picked on, you want to be able to come back at somebody. And I think the idea is that Nygar, when he finally lashes out, you really want him to lash out at the big guy. He is a little bit more interesting as he gets more confidence.
One of the questions I was going to throw out there, is there a Jerry Lundegaard in all of us? That reminds me of a documentary about white men suicide, or they call suicide corridor. The rate of suicides happening within a certain belt of America, But they had an interview with this one guy, and basically he was talking about a society. Society doesn't want you if you're not a winner. And that, I just remember those words because how true that is. Like, what was Jerry really going for? In other words, he kept talking about, this is my deal. Goes, no, this is my deal now. There, in other words, he wanted his own, for lack of a better word, fiefdom, something that, he could sit there and say, make my mark.
He wanted ownership, ownership of something that's his and only his. The deal became that kind of metaphor of, this is going to change my position in my family's life and in my father-in-law's company. So I think what makes it fascinating is the fact that how he views himself, to the point that he couldn't literally ask for the money for his father-in-law to invest. But I want to ask, because I was a little confused in the beginning of it. Are we led to believe that he already invested that money in that lot, and he needed to get money back to replace what he technically maybe stole from his father-in-law's company?
Well, yes, 320,000, right? Was he on the phone? Yeah. The thing, and my guess, because I listened to that a couple times. I was trying to figure out, now, did he already? Because he's got the money. What is he doing like that with that money? Is that money in something? Because I don't know at least I missed it. If that was in something that he lost already, right, or something.
Yeah.
Because the guy kept asking for those plate numbers, and
Right.
He kept giving him bullshit. Like, what was with that? In other words, is that money that he already embezzled, lost, or?
I don't know, but do you remember though when the guy contacted him again?
Right.
He said that if I might have to ask for the money back. So maybe that's what it was. Maybe he was able to con that money from him to get these cars or whatever that he never got. And somehow or another, he screwed himself and I think that might have been the reason why he couldn't ask his father-in-law for it, because apparently he did something he shouldn't have done. Right, and I think he was using the ransom money to cover his track. But I wasn't quite clear on whether that's why it didn't make any sense. And I think even with Carl and Gar, they didn't make sense to them. It's like, if it's just money you want to invest, just ask your family for it. But he made a comment, he said, but they don't know, and they wouldn't give it to me if I asked.
Yeah.
So that dealings that he had with that other guy.
He's right about that, by the way. That's the father-in-law. I think he wouldn't spit on him. If he...
Well, he kicked him out of his own deal, so that kind of tells you something.
Jack, if you, let me ask you, in your acting class that you teach, let's assume, assuming you're in a classroom where you're not on the screen here. Let's say you got 3 guys doing the scene with the interview, or not the interview, where with Sam Grossman and his father-in-law, and they're cutting him out of the deal. How do most people approach a scene like that? Or, in other words, are there traps that people wind up falling into?
Well, I'd have them try not to do it the way they did it in the movie. Or imitate that. So I think that's a trap.
That's a trap. Right.
I don't know. I'd have to, because I never directed that particular scene, I'd have to think about it. I'd have to think about what it is that I would tell each of them, what they want from the, what do you want from the scene? What are you fighting for?
Jerry Gunderson is actually a great role.
I'm sorry, did you say Jerry Gunderson, or you mean
Jerry Lundergaard? Sorry.
Right. And Wade.
Marge got married to Norm, son of a gun.
Right.
Son of a Gunderson. But I think in that thing, the Jerry role is just a fucking fascinating fucking role.
Well, did you hear the story about William H. Macy? He talked about that role. He talked about he went and auditioned for the Coen brothers, and he thought he did a good job or whatever, and then he said okay. And then the more he went over the role, the more he wanted it. And so he started to stalk the Coen brothers. He followed them to New York, and I guess they had another audition, and he crashed that, and he did another audition for him and stuff. And then he made a joke about, if you don't give me this role, I'll shoot your dog. And he made a comment. He says he was glad they laughed, which he makes he made a point of saying, as an actor, you should never want a role that bad, because if you want it so bad, more than likely you won't be able to do a good job in the audition. But at the same time, he says, I know this character. So Jack, you should tell your students that if they want a role bad enough, stalk the casting director and the directors, and I think they'll probably get the role too.
Never worked for me.
Stalk the teacher so you can get that scene in class.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't get too far.
Now, I have a question for you guys. Now, when you first saw Fargo for the very first time in the theater, what was your feeling? What was the initial feeling? Because obviously the writing and the dialect and how quirky it was, but did you come out of that movie liking it right from the get-go? I did, yeah.
You did? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I had mixed feelings. I think I liked it, and then because I hadn't really seen other movies that were similar, I wasn't that sure about how I felt.
Right.
But then eventually, the more I thought about it, the more I liked it.
But that sense of humor in all their dark and their dark places is what I got most of it. And I got it out of this too.
It's been 23 years since I've seen it. I remember liking it when I saw it.
Yeah.
Watching it again, I was so surprised how well the movie held up for me. And I think I love the movie more. I think I love it more now than I did when I saw it 23 years ago. But I want to hit on this. The ending is fascinating to me because it really showed how Minnesota, this very bland, boring town of, Fargo, which is funny because Fargo's in North Dakota, but a lot of stuff seemed to happen in Minnesota. But the way that those characters, the kidnappers and the things that are happening, and then when you get to that ending where you got Marge really kind of reprimanding Gar in the back seat, I just felt like what a really interesting comment on people who are. I felt like it was almost a comment on people commit crime, people literally that commit act of violence, and that their reasoning never makes sense a lot of time. And I just thought that the way she said that it's and she says that she makes a line. She says, "And look, it's a beautiful day." And I remember just thinking to myself, I'm like, I've seen this. I've watched all this movie. Every day does not look like a beautiful day. But for her, though, it made sense. And then I love the line where she says, "I don't understand." And I just thought that it was such a fascinating comment that, rarely do you get to see in a crime drama, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then I love the shot with her and her husband, and they talk about the stamp. And you just feel like for Marge, the next day will be a normal day. It's just, it's fascinating how a normal life can be. I think that's what Jerry missed. I think that the idea is that he couldn't accept the fact that maybe if he grew a little balls, he could have ventured out. He could have asked, got the money and started his own business or just enjoy what he has.
Or even if he just appreciated his life, just appreciate it and not all this, he maybe even leave the business,
just step out from underneath his father.
Appreciated the world, that he's in. Yeah, it could be a different world. Of course, we wouldn't have a movie.
Of course, but I think that's what the ending is kind of. I think that's what that ending represented was that you have these plans that you think this money is going to change your life. It made it worse.
Yeah.
What if Carl and Jerry are in the same group therapy, getting the help they need?
They're in trouble now. I hate to take a look at what that group looks like. Some sad batch of dudes.
Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah.
now, gosh darn it.
And then he even forgot about his son. So I love the fact that he didn't want to go into why he needed the money. He does that thing where he says, well, that's kind of personal. That's kind of kidnap my wife and let's get some ransom money, but why I need the money? No, that's a line too far. It's kind of personal here.